We're joined now by the Premier of the province, Cathy Dunderdale. Premier, you're on the air. Good morning.
Good morning, Bill.
How are you doing after your conference? Good?
I'm doing great, thank you. And I did make a commitment to you last week to come back after the meetings and have a conversation with you about that.
And just before you get started on that, Premier, if you don't mind, can I ask you, is there a genuine open First Ministers conference involving the Prime Minister's schedule for any time in the future?
No, there isn't, and that is very, very unfortunate.
Very unfortunate. Have you ever been at a First Minister's conference with the Prime Minister?
No, I have not.
So all the while you've been the Premier, before and after the election, and for the foreseeable future, there's no First Minister's conference that used to be considered one of the most important institutions in the nation.
Absolutely. Have been held for many, many years, stopped a number of years ago when this Prime Minister took office. Very, very unfortunate. And that makes these Premier's meetings even more important because we have to step into that void of leadership created by the federal government and talk about issues that are important to our individual provinces but are important nationally as well. It becomes even more important when you have a federal government that has a divide and conquer mentality. Yeah,
I feel more secure in the importance of the Federation of, the Council of the Federation, the Premier's meetings.
That's what it's been called for 25 years, and we need to go back to that.
I know, Premier's Conference is a better term. But I feel more secure in your statement of importance of the Premier's Council if, number one, the federal government paid any attention to what the Premiers were saying as a group or individually, and number two, if it wasn't held behind closed doors and nobody knows what was actually discussed or the priority given to things.
Well, I don't agree with that statement because there are communiques that come out of our meeting regularly through the day, not just at the end of the meeting. The chair of COF and the chair circulates between the provinces, comes before the national media twice every day to talk about the progress of the meetings and the agenda of the meetings. More than that, there's a unimic available to premiers at all times before the national media, which they take full advantage of to talk about issues that are important to all of us.
Yeah.
And at the end of the conference, this time we had over an hour news conference in front of the national media. So it is extremely important. To say that the Prime Minister wouldn't pay attention to what 13 premiers are together talking about, I don't think he's that foolhardy. And, we have evidence that one of the biggest issues we had before us at this meeting is the changes to the Canada Job Grant. And, there are two pots of funding under that program. Is the labour market development, where we fund literacy and numeracy skills. We've had a lot of talk about ABE in this province. Well, that's where the federal funding will come from, that pot of money for that program. They're proposing cutting all of that funding, over $300 million. They are talking about creating significant changes to the LMDA, which involves jobs, skills training, apprenticeships, all of that kind of stuff, about how that's delivered. They shared that information with 5 provinces, but didn't share it with the 13.
Yeah.
We knew that when we came together to talk as 13 premiers. All of that information was shared.
Right.
And a position was developed unanimously amongst the 13 of us about how we would deal with that, with the people of Canada and with the federal government particularly.
Right.
Extremely important to Newfoundland and Labrador. Premier Giz, particularly in his statements to the media, pointed out to everyone that in 2015 we have a federal election, and we are becoming immediately engaged in that campaign.
Are you going to take on Harper as Danny Williams did, anyone but Conservative in the next federal election?
Well, I have tried very hard to work cooperatively with Prime Minister Harper. You know, we took a lot of cuts to funding, and I'm sure some of that was as a penalty to the people of Newfoundland and Labrador because of positions that were taken here in the province. I tried hard to avoid that, and I wanted to get where at least I could put on the table, as I say, the legitimate aspirations and expectations of the people in Newfoundland and Labrador. So, you know, we're going to do whatever it takes to get this Prime Minister to pay attention to what's going on in this province and to respond appropriately to the people of Newfoundland and Labrador. Because you don't have a representative, we don't have a representative in the federal government, doesn't relieve him of his responsibility to the people of this province.
You know, correct me if I'm wrong, sort of historically or in sequence here, but I thought the cuts or the lack of response to important matters like search and rescue, for example, and some of the other cuts, I thought that they came or were not, we weren't successful in them after you had kind of made up with the Prime Minister of Canada, after Danny Williams' tirades against him.
Certainly some of that would have happened. Yeah. You know, I think that a very callous view is taken of this province in terms of what it is that we look for, the kind of supports we look for from the federal government. But unilateral changes were made that had a significant impact on the revenue of Newfoundland and Labrador before I became Premier of this province.
Right.
And you know, in lots of ways it continues, but just the whole approach in terms of, you know, sharing information with 5 provinces, but not with the 13. That's absolutely unacceptable. And when we get together as premiers, we say that is unacceptable, and we put together a united force to deal with the Prime Minister. And we're going to continue to do that. So you're either going to engage with us one way, or we're going to engage in another way. And we all have responsibilities to the people who elected us, and it's very important to us. You know, Premiers' meetings are not all wink, wink, nudge, nudge. There is not unanimity on a lot of issues, and the energy strategy is one of those. And you know, some very difficult conversations take place within the confines of that room, and they need to be very frank and very open. You know, I'm disappointed sometimes here. Like, you know, I talked last week about the fact that we've tried hard to work with Quebec in partnership twice to get a plan to develop the Lower Churchill. We've worked with the open access transmission to try and be able to wheel power through Quebec. We've tried every which way and been thwarted at every front. And when we realized that they were not going to cooperate with us in any way at all to develop the Lower Churchill, they were going to stop it at any cost, we developed a strategy that left them out of the equation. And to see a letter in the paper yesterday that describes that as arrogance is troubling to me.
But on the Premier's conference you're mentioning, I mean, it's one thing for 13 Premiers to gang up on the federal government. I mean, you'll pardon me saying it, but that's kind of easy to do. Fed bashing is one of the favourite political sports of Canada and has been since Confederation back in 1867. But to get other Premiers to see things rationally and straight and cooperatively, like Madam Premier Marois in Quebec, you know, to help out, be cooperative in trying to develop our resource in Labrador. Yet that wasn't raised at this conference. Am I correct on that?
No, you are incorrect.
Well, I thought you were going to wait till September.
And Madam Marois and I came to an agreement that we would have a meeting early in the fall to talk about these important issues.
Okay, that's what I meant.
I've always been open to dialogue with Quebec. And as I talked to you last week, Premier Charest and Premier McGuinty and I had a plan that we were trying to progress on the development of Gull Island to serve power needs in Labrador. That changed when, you know, we weren't able to move forward with that when Premier Charest was defeated. You know, and we continue to find a way forward with Quebec. but if they are going to be intransigent in their position, our economic future depends on the development of our resources. We can't let them stand in the way. But anytime she wants to talk, I'm happy to do it, and we're going to do that in the fall.
When I said it wasn't raised at this Premier's Conference, I meant in a substantive way. Obviously, you got to put off to another meeting in the fall. You agreed to that. But why wouldn't it have been raised? Why wouldn't other premiers have jumped in on this behind closed doors, speaking frankly, no press, and sort of go after this in a substantive way?
But we do talk in a substantive. That's just my point exactly. And one of the reasons why you do these things behind closed doors, so that you can have those very frank discussions. And we have 2 provinces that are saying that they're opting out of the development of an energy strategy. That is not preventing the 11 of us who are making a full commitment and committed to having these difficult discussions at COF meetings, whether Quebec or BC wants them or not. Right. You have to sit there. We have to, times change, people change, premiers change, issues change. It is important, as I pointed out in the COF meeting, this is about the whole economic development of a region, not just one province, but the whole Atlantic region of our country. We're not going to come in here and talk about job growth, and driving our economy and ignore the elephant in the room. And they're my words exactly. Okay. And so we need to have these difficult discussions. But people have to listen. It reminds me in some ways of this whole Muskrat Falls debate that goes on. Every criticism that has been put out there that has caused concern, we haven't asked the people of the province to accept government's word or Nalcor's word. We have gone and gotten independent analysis and independent reports and made them available to the people of the province. Our critics are there, but there is not one piece of substance that they have put forward that any of us can deal with. Now,
Premier, can I ask you, can you hang on for a couple of minutes while we go to an ad break? We've missed it by 5 minutes or so now, but we need to catch up on it. But you're okay with that, and then we'll get back and conclude the rest of the show. So
happy to do it.
We'll be back in a couple of minutes. And we are back. Is the Premier on the air now, or do I need to press the button? Would you mind telling me that there, please, Danielle? Okay. Can you hear me, Premier?
I can.
Okay, great. I wasn't quite sure how the system works here. I don't know if you're afflicted by user-unfriendly systems in your office, but...
They're all unfriendly to me. I'm not a technology... I'm not all that expert in technology, I'm afraid.
Right. Now, we're rapidly running out of time, but here's a question that persistently bothers and perturbs me. We're a country that is practically surrounded by treacherous waters, oceans, Great Lakes, you name it. Yes. Yet here we are, patting ourselves on the back for finally, at this late stage, getting all 13 premiers on side when it comes to getting a sensible response from the federal government on search and rescue in those treacherous waters. It boggles my mind. How do you feel about it?
Search and rescue is extremely important to Newfoundland and Labrador. It is hard to overstate how important this issue is to the people of the province. It's also important in Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, PEI, Quebec, BC, and the Northern Territories. In terms of our own particular experience, we have been dealing directly with the federal government, advocating for change, very necessary change, change that the federal Auditor General spoke about in his last report, and lobbying for change. We're going to advance that piece of work wherever we can. And, when we have an opportunity to raise it at national tables, to give it that kind of a profile, to make sure that 13 premiers, even those that don't have coastal communities, understand how important it is, and to join with us in driving that on the federal agenda, making it known to all of the people in Canada through the national media what an important issue that is, then it helps. It's not the be-all, end-all. There's no great padding on the back going on here in this office about the fact that we've raised the issue. It's an important issue to people of Newfoundland and Labrador, and it was important to get it on the agenda, and I'm glad that I did, and I'm glad that I had unanimous support from the other 12 premiers in doing that.
So what's the next?
We have to keep advancing.
Yeah.
I don't have a magic wand, nor does anybody else, to make Stephen Harper listen to us, to respond appropriately to our requests. But the same as I heard Merv Wiseman.
How come we losing? We seem to be losing you, Premier. I don't know what happened.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Merv Wiseman, who advocates very strongly on this issue, talks to you. You acknowledge how important it is to do that on open line. Whether or not the Prime Minister is listening, he's the only one who has the opportunity to do something about this.
Right.
But we use whatever we have available to us to get the attention of the Prime Minister and to try to get him to understand how important this is, not only to Newfoundland and Labrador, but to the country.
So I guess we'll find out how important the Premiers' conferences are when it comes to federal-provincial cooperation on these important issues when the unanimous decision, the unanimous position of the Premiers is sent off to the Prime Minister now, and we see what kind of a response, whether he responds positively or not to it.
He may not, and it won't be a first. Do you know any Prime Minister in our history that responded positively to unanimous requests from premiers, regardless of their political stripe?
No.
Any time in our past, I don't think you'd be able to point that out.
No, for sure.
But what we're trying to do is make him realize, and Premier Giz spoke on behalf of all of the premiers in this country to say that we're going to take a position coming into 2015 on these issues that are extremely important to us. What are we going to do in the face of it? If I were to take your position, then if advocating means nothing, then we do nothing. We sit down and twiddle our fingers. I'm not prepared to let Stephen Harper off the hook. I'm not prepared to do it. So whatever tools or resources that I have available to me, I'm going to use them. And hopefully one of them, or some of them, or all of them, along with the Merv Wisemans and everybody else who has, an interest in this issue, we're going to make a difference. Right. Hopefully we're going to be able to make him listen. Okay, well, very interesting. While you were speaking, emails coming in left, right and centre. Ask the Premier this, ask the Premier that, and so on. There's a lot of interest in your position on things, Premier, including, one email came in asking whether the Premier is now sorry that she decided to be nice to Mr. Harper, whether in fact there's more to be gained by taking him on frontally, rather than, trying to be friendly and cooperative and so on. These are issues which we... Absolutely. But we have a comparator.
Yeah.
Were we any better the other way?
Well, okay. Both seem to be failures, but we'll deal with that at some other point. If you will come on like this and answer a few questions at some time at your convenience, we'd be absolutely delighted. I've got to say goodbye now, unfortunately.
No, but I'm happy any time.
Okay, well, join us whenever it strikes you, convenient for you, early in the show, so we can devote adequate time.
Absolutely. Happy to do it, and thank you so much for this.
Thank you, Premier.
All the best.
Bye-bye.